Good morning. There we are. My name is Molly. I'm an associate minister here at Pilgrim. I also am music minister for the 9:30 service down in Friendship Hall, our contemporary service. I find it a great honor to be with you again today. I love when I get in here in time to hear the choir anthem, and that really got my heart settled to share this message with you. I am nervous to share this today. I've got a smile on my face, but inside I'm quaking. And the reason why is because I'm here today to talk about immigration. One of our candles that we've lit this fall is for the immigrant communities here in Green Bay. And when I say immigration, we have all sorts of politics that come up in our head. And it's not even easy, it's just natural to have a reaction, to have thoughts. And I like you guys a lot. And I love you, and I want you to love me too. And so I get nervous when I have to share things that have been hard for me. It's vulnerable, and I think might be hard for all of us to hear today. But here we are. Even as I look at you, I just feel your love. I just love it. You guys are so great. So this fall, we have been focusing our prayers, our thoughts, our sermons on this question: what if? So what if we changed our mindset from one of just merely surviving to a mindset of thriving? What if we hoped for and worked towards God's best in ourselves, in our families, our friendships, our church, our community, our world? What if we continued to gather around these candles, to gather around these people and listen and to learn from marginalized and vulnerable populations of people right here in our building? What if we were to listen more and listen longer to the senior generation, to the next generation, to people struggling with mental illness, to people that are a part of the immigrant communities here, to people who are incarcerated? What if our thriving, and when I say our, I mean, what if our thriving like Pilgrim Congregational Church, us, what if our thriving is directly linked to these populations of people and their capability to thrive? What if our thriving here at Pilgrim Congregational Church is directly linked, it's connected to those populations of people that are represented and their capability to thrive? What if Pilgrim can't thrive if they don't thrive? What if we're that connected? So today, we focus on our immigrant communities here. And as we do so, we turn to the book of Esther in the Bible. Esther is a book in the Hebrew Scriptures, and it is a book found right before Psalms-ish. Like, I think the book before might be like, I can't even do it. Job, maybe, Nehemiah, Esther, it's around there. Okay? Trust me. So, but we turn to the book of Esther in our Bibles, and we find the Jewish people are living under foreign rule in a land of Persia. The Persian Empire doesn't exist anymore, but this story will take place on the borders of what is now Iran and Iraq. So we know that the Jewish people in this story are outside of Israel. They have actually been taken captive, and they are in a forced migration. So they're immigrants in this new community, but it's a forced migration. And they have decided to remain in exile. So the king of Persia let the Israelites go back home. They said, you can go home. But some of them didn't. Some of them stayed dispersed throughout the Persian Empire. And they chose, like many of our modern immigrants here in the United States, they chose to stay in a land that was not originally their homeland. They chose to be a minority culture within a dominant culture, a people within a people. This part of the story of Esther involves 4 characters. Those 4 characters are King Ahasuerus, who's the Persian king, Haman the Agagite. Oh, I should pause. So Ahasuerus, just so you know, is sometimes Xerxes or Artaxerxes. I have not clear understanding why they change his name up so much, but like in your Bible, it might say something else. In the NRSV, he's referred to as King Ahasuerus, but that's the Persian king. Haman the Agagite, Mordecai the Jew, and then another Jew who's Mordecai's little cousin, Queen Esther. Her name originally was Hadassah, but here she's Queen Esther, and she's married to King Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus doesn't know that Esther's a Jew. It's on the down low. It's a secret. But here we are in this story. I'm going to be starting around chapter 3. So in a course of events that are kind of curious, all of a sudden in our story, Haman, the Agagite, who's a court official, is granted permission from the king, his boss, to let everyone else bow down to him. Imagine that. Like, your boss says, hey, I called you in here today because everybody is going to get to bow down to you now. Bless. Like, wow, that'd be something. So everyone's supposed to bow down to Haman. But Mordecai, who's also part of that court, he stands at the gate as well. He refuses to bow to Haman. There's bad blood between Haman's people and Mordecai's people, and it goes all the way back to the book of Exodus. Whereas the Israelites were leaving Egypt to come into the land of Canaan, they were attacked by the Amalekites. And from that moment on, the history between Haman the Agagite, his family, and Mordecai the Jew's family was not good. They were mortal enemies for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So now we have Haman saying, bow down to me, and Mordecai's like, I don't think so. So he refuses. He refuses. And then we find this in verse 5 of chapter 3. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance, which obeisance is like prostration or like worship. So when Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance to Haman, Haman was infuriated. Not just a little miffed, not a little angry, but infuriated. He was infuriated. Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance to him, so Haman was infuriated. But he thought it beneath him to kill only Mordecai. I just have to pause there for a second. Like, when did we start talking about killing people? That's a big leap from like, you won't bow down to me and like, you're dead. Like, whoa. But he thought it beneath him to kill only Mordecai. So having been told who Mordecai's people were, Haman plotted to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Whoa. So Mordecai refuses to bow, and we're jumping right to murder, to the extermination of a whole people group, to genocide. This seems like a out of balance response. Imagine, I was trying to think of other instances of bowing and just posture, and I instantly thought of, just imagine if one African-American football player decided to take a knee rather than stand during the national anthem, and then the NFL president got on the news that night and said, kill them all. Kill all the African-American football players throughout the whole land. That's how ludicrous this is. We'd be like, what? Lock that guy up. Haman's pride is hurt. His frail ego is assaulted, and he reacts by mass association of all Jews, plotting to slaughter an entire ethnic group. Haman uses his power and his influence with the king to then poison the king's mind against the Jews, because he can't go through with this plot unless he gets the king's okay. So now he's going to start to poison the king's mind. So here we are in verse 8. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered and separated among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. There's a certain people scattered. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not appropriate for the king to tolerate them. Poison. There's a certain people scattered. That word scattered infers that they have infiltrated all of society in a dangerous way, that they're a threat. And this rhetoric reminds me of many other times in history. I'm sure you have thought of people like, "Ooh, that sounds a little close." I've heard those words before from other people who've led crusades, who've led the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, Asian American internment camps, Indigenous American boarding schools, the African slave trade, Christian persecution in Nigeria and Sudan, female infanticide of little baby girls born in India and China, or not even given a chance to be born just because they're girls. And I could keep going, unfortunately. I've also heard similar rhetoric on the news. There's a people scattered and separate. I've heard that rhetoric on the news about Mexican immigrants, Arab immigrants, Muslims, those LGBTQ plus people and their gay agenda. Those words. There's a certain people scattered and separate. They don't follow your laws, King Ahasuerus. They do things differently than we do. They're dangerous. They're a threat. And you, King, should not tolerate their presence in our land. Pride. This just reeks of pride. An elevated sense of self, a wounded ego, a threatened way of life, endangering my power dynamics, endangering a way of life. Something might have to change due to new cultures and their presence, new beliefs and ways of being. Pride turns to prejudice. All those people, those, us, them. My heart grieves at how similar Haman's words are to words I have seen on my very own Facebook feed from people I love. Words that I've seen on the nightly news. Can I just say that CNN and Fox News are biased? I've heard these words on both sides, poisoning the other side. Poison. Lumping all people of a certain ethnicity, race, or faith into easy and oversimplified categories. This is called demonization. And in my opinion, it's evil. It's evil. It's anti-gospel. It's anti-Christ. Jesus commanded us to love people, love our neighbors, love our enemies. Woof, that's hard. To pray for them, to want what's best for them, to lay down our lives for them. And here's the part that kicks me. He said, even if you call somebody an idiot, which I have done to the people that don't agree with me, if you call them an idiot, you've murdered them. That's the words of Jesus. perfect love said that if you call them an idiot, you have murdered them. Our speech, our ideologies, our hate, our prejudice, our greed for a way of life that comforts us to the detriment of other people or people that aren't like us, the way of life that ensures goodness for us who are born here to the detriment of people who are trying to run for their lives. In my interpretation of Scripture, it's not Jesus. Pride turns into prejudice, which turns into a plan. This is where it gets scary. Because then the plan is to destroy people, to destroy the Jews. It's real dark here in this story. But there's something at work which is unseen. We can't see it in the text. It's called providence. According to the Oxford Dictionary of the Old Testament, providence means that in some invisible and inscrutable way, God governs all creatures, actions, and circumstances through the normal and ordinary course of human life without the intervention of the miraculous. So providence, God governing without intervention of the miraculous, working in our everydayness, in the ordinary. This is crazy, but God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. Not once. 10 chapters, and God's name is never mentioned. No Yahweh, no Elohim, nothing. So one would guess that maybe God is invisible or absent. But here in the text, at the end of chapter 3 and turning to chapter 4, the tides start to turn, and here is where God's providence sneaks into our story. Because in the next 7 chapters, God is working out God's plan, and he's doing it not through God, Elohim, Yahweh, like those words. We don't see that in the text, but we do see people. And the providence of God is worked out through the response of people. Mordecai and Esther, they will step up. They will resist. They will lament. They will confront powers that be, and they will plead for the lives of others. When Mordecai hears of the decree to kill the Jews, he laments. In chapter 4, verse 1, we read this. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, so this decree to kill all the Jews, Mordecai tore his clothes. And he put on sackcloth and ashes, which is the ritual symbol of deep grief for the Jewish people. So he puts on sackcloth and ashes, and then he goes out through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. God, have mercy. Mordecai's lament resonates with the heart of God, a loud and bitter cry that pierces through complacency and persecution. God's heart for life and flourishing resounds in Mordecai's grief. And also then in his instruction to Queen Esther, because you see, Queen Esther was like, hey, psst, Mordecai, keep it down. You're going to get me in trouble? Shh. Right? Esther says, put your clothes back on and stop wailing, please. But Mordecai gives her these instructions. Mordecai affronts her apathy with these words in verse 13 of chapter 4. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your family, you and your father's family will perish. Who knows, Esther? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this. Mordecai tells Esther that her future is linked to the future of other Jews. Remember, we talked in the beginning, maybe our thriving is connected. She realizes that she can't just hide up in her tower and stay protected. This is going to affect her because we're all in this together. Mordecai is convinced of providence. Oh, Esther, if you don't talk, something good's going to come because God's not going to let us down. So do you want to be a part of this, Esther, or not? Do you want to be part of the unfolding of God's providential plan? Do you want to be a part of that? Or do you want to hide out and hope it doesn't come to you? God's providence sneaks into the story through the responsibility of people as they confront pride and prejudice and a plan. God's providence unfolds through the faithful lament of Mordecai and the prophetic words of Esther, because Esther changes her mind. And she goes before the king, and right before she goes, she says those famous words, "If I perish, I perish." I know that you know people that have fought for what is right with that in their heart. If I perish, I perish. Right? That's beautiful. And it echoes into the Garden of Gethsemane hundreds of years later with another prophet. The prophet of all prophets, the God-man Jesus, who says, "Father, not my will, but your will be done. If I perish for the love of the world." This is solidarity. This is love. God's providence does not give us a pass on investment and engagement. Like, God's at work, peace, I'll just be up in the tower. That's not how it works. God's providence plays out. God, our humble King, allows us, humans, finite beings, to participate in the infinite, to participate in the providential plan of God. This is an honor. It's terrifying, and it's going to cost us, but it's amazing. So as I look at this story, I feel convicted, and it's hard to talk about, but I think, like, who do I want to be in the story? As a Christ follower, who am I called to be in this story? Am I called to be a passive king who's like, I don't know, I'm just not going to pay attention to what's going on in the world? Sure, you said that, all right, I'll do that. That sounds good. We'll just, whatever. I don't think I'm called to be passive. I don't think I'm called to be Haman either. I don't think I'm called to be antagonistic to anyone. Pray for your enemies. I do feel that I'm called to be like Mordecai, to let the hurt of the world and the sorrow of the world pierce my soul, and to lament. I do feel like I'm called to be Esther, to use my voice, my vote, my influence, my money, my resources, my power for the flourishing of other people so that others may live. And what's freaky for me is the part where I have to say, even if it costs me mine. That's hard. We're called to be like Esther, to resist. We're called to be like Mordecai, to lament. In closing, one of my favorite scholars, Abraham Joshua Heschel, he's a Jewish scholar, he's known to have said the following: "Daily we should take account and ask, what have I done today to alleviate the anguish, to mitigate the evil, to prevent humiliation? Let there be a grain of profit in every man." Let there be a grain of profit in everyone. Just a grain be enough. May we advocate for people that are suffering. May we advocate for the immigrants. May we lay down our lives for the foreigner, because that's Jesus. May we be more and more like Christ. So be it. Amen.